I want to talk about two songs that are not vaporwave, but they do have a similar influence to them. And they're both R&B songs. I guess I think they are. I know a lot of times an album will be considered one certain genre, although there'll be like variation throughout the album. But anyways, I think sometimes it's not about classifying music as one certain thing, because if you say, oh, I only listen to X genre, you're really limiting yourself in terms of what you can be open to or what you might be interested in. Yeah, I just think these two are really interesting to me. One that I wanted to bring up was Little Lies by Odie. I personally really like that one, and I think because I started listening to it, and then if you haven't heard it yet, I would pause it right now and play it for yourself. I'm not going to put the song in here because I want people to be able to watch this. But you know, when you get... Okay, I'm assuming you've listened to it. I don't want to spoil it for you because it is a little bit of a surprise. But once you get to the partway point of the song, it hits this point where it cuts off the music, and then you hear like a cassette changing, and then suddenly the song plays again, except for this time it's a slow version. And to the best of my knowledge, this song was like before the recent trend of slowed and reverb, and this was just somebody's track off their album rather than like an edit. So the idea of them editing the songs themselves and sort of creating like this vaporwave or this nostalgia factor before even releasing the song to the public, because usually that's something that comes with a remix or a rehashing of the song into something different, using the song as a sample. I feel like it's really interesting to see an artist do that themselves before releasing the song. Another thing I noticed that could kind of tie into vaporwave, because I don't know that this was necessarily the inspiration for the song, but I liked how there was sort of the atmospheric feeling to it, because a lot of times there will be that influence of creating a surrounding. Like if you're trying to create a mall soft vibe for an album, of course you would use background noise of being in the mall for some of the tracks to give you that feeling of like, oh, we're at the mall right now and this is the 80s and this is some jazzy background music that's playing as we're walking through the concourse in between the stores. Or I found it interesting that he would create this atmosphere for us, like, hey, you're at your house listening to this, it's on a cassette, and now we're taking out the cassette and flipping it over for side B or playing the next track or something. I just found it cool that you get that glimpse into who you are and where you are when you're listening to the song. You're not just you listening to it, but you're somewhat playing a character as you listen to it, which is another thing that vaporwave does. Is it's not just you listening to the music, it's your character. Because there's a lot of songs, and you'll see too, like when people discuss it, they're like, wow, imagine myself on a subway in Japan in the 80s, or they'll be like, wow, I can just picture like I'm in this post-apocalyptic setting and I'm rummaging through the remains of a grocery store, and from somewhere this eerie corporate music starts playing, and there's always like a little story that goes along with it. And I think too, with people's album artwork and with people's like visuals they'll put along with videos. The second example I wanted to reference is No Manners by Teyana, because I think it's another example. So it does a similar thing where there's part of the song that's slowed down, so that pitches it lower and makes her voice sound super different if that is her singing. I think it is her singing, and they've pitched it lower and slowed it down in the background. And I think it's interesting because it's like she's saying something and then they sampled that and played around with it to make it almost part of the music, because you can't, it's almost an instrument at this point, because you can barely, well, not an instrument, but like a musical element, because you can barely tell that it's a voice anymore. It's just kind of like slowed and more, I don't know, it's really interesting. And again, this is an example of it seeping into something more mainstream, because it's not just somebody's remix. Like, this is part of the album. This is like an official track. And I thought it was interesting too how, like, the way the sample was used, it's not just like they slowed down a whole song in the background. It was like they repeated the same thing. They repeated the same thing like several times. And at some points, they were able to use that little piece of music that they had slowed down throughout, and they were able to loop it and repeat it to make kind of a beat in the background. I found it really cool. And it's hard to say what the artist's inspiration truly was. I mean, I didn't want to do a lot of background research, because I feel like when you're making music, the music really does need to speak for itself. I mean, sometimes it is cool to see more meaning to it, or to read an interview, an article, or whatever, watch a video where the artist explains the process behind their work. But I think just for me and the type of music that I'm interested in, I really want the music to be the one telling the story. And it can be supported by the cover artwork and the name of the song, but I really think the song itself has to do the heavy lifting, like establishing the atmosphere within the song using background effects like I talked about with Little Lies, or where you're creating a duet with yourself, like it's an internal conversation, because there's two people singing, but it's both her. It's just one is slower and pitched down to sound like it's a different voice. And it's really cool also because they use it to drag out the note in the words I need. And I know that these are not for everybody. And again, I mean, vaporwave in general might be a little bit of an acquired taste. I think for me, there's some things that I have listened to where I just think, oh no, this is too weird. This isn't for me. And there's other things where I'm like, this is weird, but I kind of like it. Like it tells a story, or it speaks to me in some way where it's not just about sound good, but it's also about, does it make you feel something? Because sometimes music isn't just about, oh, it's pretty, but it's also about, oh, does it use music theory in a creative way? Does it make you feel something when you listen to it? Does it inspire you? And I think that's something I want to bring. I don't want to make you dislike the music by overthinking it, but I also want you to think about it enough that you feel inspired or intrigued or interested. And that's all I've got. I am really curious to know who has heard these before, and if you had any of the same thoughts I did when listening to them. So please let me know.